I would like to introduce myself through my different professional sources. Media educator, specialized teacher at the Giovanni XXIII Pascoli Comprehensive Institute in Fasano and adjunct professor at the Aldo Moro University of Bari. Io non lo so se mi vedono, comunque credo di sì. Today, these souls merge in a single vision. You may be wondering, what does an expert in communicative codes have to do with food science? The answer lies in the title. We are elastic. I will talk about how an encounter born from an organizational decision that interrupted an ongoing educational path turned out to be an unexpected event of great scientific relevance. In fact, I found myself in front of a cognitive profile that, thanks to a gaze trained in communicative and perspectual codes, I immediately recognized it not as a difficult case, but as a true research scope. It was precisely this unplanned shift that allowed me to intercept a signal that would otherwise have remained invisible. Not a problem of the individual, but a problem of the system that design food, environments, and their interface without sufficient elasticity. The concept of elasticity was born from an insight I experienced during the night of St. Lawrence at the presentation of the first book by the writer Ciro Irace, Mare Chiaro, Vivere con l'anima. In that context, far from laboratories and protocols, I clearly recognized what was missing from my scientific reflection, an image capable of holding together both rigor and humanity. The elastic band became, for me, an epistemological metaphor. An elastic stretches, changes shape to hold things together, and adapts to the force it encounters without breaking. In that moment, I understood that doing research means exactly this, moving from the apparent vision, the one that classifies, labels, and standardizes, to the real vision of the person as they perceive and encode the world. From this perspective, narrative is not an accessory element, but a methodological tool. I refer to functional narrative, a mode of listening that allows us to grasp the author's perspectual codes before interpreting them as errors, deficiencies, or anomalies. This is the bridge toward an elastic mind, a mind that does not force data into predefined frameworks, but bends its own frameworks to accommodate the data. Being elastic as researchers, therefore, does not mean abandoning method, but having the courage to temporarily suspend standard protocols in order to understand how the author feels, sees, and reads reality. It is precisely from this shift in posture that the case study I will present shortly was born. My student, 11 years old, with a borderline cognitive functioning profile, has been, without knowing it, the true teacher of this entire journey. When I first met her, The language used around her was always the same: selective, rigid, difficult. I chose to do just one thing differently: suspend the judgment and observe. For her, a pizza is not a problematic food in terms of taste. It is a system error. It is not a whim. It is visual chaos. When colors blend, when red invades white, when shapes load their boundaries, her mind can no longer decode what is in front of her. The food simply stops being readable. This girl does not reject food. She rejects the undecipherable. Her unbreakable boundary is not anger, but a visual chaos, where clear chromatic boundaries do not exist. Cognitive safety does not exist. And this is where the real shift in perspective occurs. If we move our focus from the behavior to the system, the question is no longer why doesn't she hit, but what kind of visual message are we asking her to decode? Traditional cuisine, which for us represents richness, fusion, conviviality, becomes for her a perspectual barrier. In this sense, the diagnosis does not explain the phenomenon. It merely describes it. The investigation begins when we stop looking at the girl as the barrier of a limitation and start observing the environment as a possible source of the error. This is where the clinical case transforms into scientific data. It was at this point, in my observation, that I felt a need to give a name to what I was seeing: food chromatic illiteracy. In our Apulian culinary tradition, a pizza or a panzerotto are symbols of identity and conviviality. For her, instead, they are true system errors. The chromatic blending of tomato and mozzarella, the color inviting the shape, the fusion of elements during cooking generate a visual noise that her mind is unable to decode. Even the most carefully presented dishes, with sauces, swears, little leaves, or decoration, rather than enhancing the food, become a barrier. Too much visual complexity prevents her from clearly reading the identity of the dish. For her, every additional element that overlaps the main colors increases the noise and reduces cognitive safety. Here, it is essential to clarify one point. We are not facing a refusal of food, but a failure in the visual communication of food. When colors blend and lose their boundaries, the food message becomes ambiguous, unstable, and devoid of identity. This girl, it's a true chromatic selection. She needs the purity of color to assign a safe identity to food. Color, for her, is not a decoration. It is a cognitive access code. And it is precisely at this stage that the discovery of green emerges. Pastel pesto becomes a safe harbor not because of its taste, but because of its visual coherence. Green is stable, recognizable, and trustworthy. It does not blend. It does not invade. It does not confuse. In terms of food science, This forces us into an uncomfortable reflection. When we design food and packaging, assuming a universal ability to decode chromatic complexity, we are excluding part of the population. In this case, illiteracy does not belong to the individual, but to the system that communicates without asking itself for whom it is communicating. Let us reflect for a moment. She lives in the heart of Puglia, considered the cradle of the Mediterranean diet. And if right here, where culture, tradition, and nutrition reach their highest expression, such evident perspectual barriers can occur. Then one can imagine that similar phenomena may be present everywhere. Millions of individuals around the world are currently unconsidered by the food industry, deprived of food autonomy simply because no one has asked the right question. My approach has been that of a tracking dog, going beyond the diagnosis, beyond the label, beyond what appears at the first glance, in order to search for the hidden signal buried within noise and confusion. These individuals have not been ignored. They have simply never been truly considered in the design of foods, packaging, and markets. What has been missing is the investigative curiosity capable of transforming the observation of a parent, a teacher, or a researcher into concrete scientific data. I chose to follow the signal. Like a tracking dog, I traced the path from visual chaos to chromatic purity, from food to cognition, leading to the discovery of an inclusive paradigm that, if applied globally, can restore food autonomy and dignity to those who are currently excluded. In the academic field, what I am describing is known as evidence-based practice integrated with narrative. My theory received its first validation in 2015 at the University of Pisa, Department of Molecular Medicine and Surgery. Dr. Giulia Vanni, who became deeply interested in my work, dedicated her entire thesis to developing my theory. The department recognized the uniqueness of this paradigm, awarding in the highest distinction, 110 over 110 cum laude. This is the scientific validation is not merely a certificate. It is the confirmation that my pedagogical nutritional observation is not anecdotal, but grounded in concrete evidence that can be replicated and applied in real educational and nutritional contexts. From this certainty arises the commission of containing this disability, designing environments, foods, and interfaces that reduce sensory, stumbling blocks, and restore autonomy and cognitive safety to those who are currently excluded. We spend millions on marketing, yet we design for an average user who in reality does not exist. Packaging overloaded with text, overlapping colors, and the visual embellishments becomes a true stumbling block, an invisible barrier that limits the autonomy of those who perceive the world differently. marketing without realizing it creates obstacles. When packaging becomes excessively complex, it no longer communicates, it confuses. For a person with visual decoding difficulties, every overloaded label is a stop signal. If institutions often arrive late, navigating by sight, the food industry today has an ethical and scientific duty to acknowledge this evidence. We must link to design for the real user in all their chromatic and cognitive complexity. In other words, we must be elastic. Elasticity means bending to accommodate diversity without breaking, allowing everyone to access food that is readable, safe, and inclusive. My mission is clear: containing diseaseability. We cannot continue to treat the person without first treating the environment that surrounds them. We must make the food environment elastic, capable of adapting, welcoming diversity, and removing the stumbling blocks that hinder autonomy and well-being. Science cannot remain located in ivory towers, populated by those who do not see the reality of facts. We must look beyond the rigidity of medical labels and finally recognize the real person. I hope this reflection will stay with you as an invitation to pursue a more human and inclusive form of research. And now I leave you with these words. When food stops being readable, it is not the mind that is fragile, but the language we have chosen to nourish it. Being elastic means changing shape without losing meaning, and food, to truly be nourishment, must learn to do the same. And thank you for staying elastic with me until the end. Thank you very, very much. Bye and good luck, everyone.